and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at.
Thank you, but we need more.
Local reaction to President Biden allowing some migrants to work while seeking asylum.
Pushback on a proposal to hike taxes on sales of million-dollar homes to fight homelessness.
I'm really excited to also just support live theater in Chicago again because, I'm struggling here.
Hamilton returns to Broadway. We sit down with Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Meat and potatoes, ranch dressing, which we all love, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Sounds delicious. The surprising history of Midwestern food. And now to some of today's top stories. Immigrant rights advocates are celebrating President Joe Biden's move to expand access to work permits for Venezuelan immigrants seeking asylum in the U.S., and they're calling on him to go one step further.
We are saying it is time. We deserve work permits too. We have families too. We've been working here for decades, and we have been luchando for decades to make sure that our communities are also protected.
Advocates are asking the president to grant work permits for millions of undocumented immigrants through a process called parole. Biden's decision to offer temporary protected status for Venezuelans who arrived in the country before July 31st means they won't face the threat of deportation and can work for 18 months. Heather Sharon will have more on this story in just a few minutes.
It's official. The city has a contract to build winterized tent cities to house some of those asylum seekers that are currently staying in police stations and airports. The $30 million contract is with a company called Garda World Federal Services and a subsidiary. They'll build the winterized tent cities and move about 1,600 migrants into temporary shelter there. A spokesperson in the mayor's office says they want the construction and the move to happen, quote, quickly.
Mental health care providers in Illinois are receiving a total $32 million in federal funding over the next 4 years. The grants were announced today at the Threshold Center for Mental Well-Being in Ravenswood. Threshold says the grants will support services provided at its certified community behavioral health clinics in Chicago, Kankakee, and McHenry County.
Coming on the program, tensions rise over the mayor's proposed real estate transfer tax. We dive into that debate.
But first, local reaction to news that some migrants can now work while seeking asylum right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
A decision by President Joe Biden to allow thousands of Venezuelan migrants sent to Chicago from the southern border to work legally could offer them a path out of city-run shelters and police stations. The president's action won praise from local officials and advocates for immigrants across the city who warned there is much more to be done to resolve the crisis. Here's Alderman Mike Rodriguez at a rally in Pilsen this morning.
Today, I stand with my brothers and sisters across the southwest side of Chicago, across the entire city of Chicago to say, thank you, but we need more. Thank you, President, but we deserve more. Thank you, President, but our country demands more for our immigrant community.
WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. Heather, what did the president do late Wednesday night?
He granted temporary protected status to nearly 500,000 Venezuelan migrants who arrived in the United States on or before July 31st. That means for the next 18 months they are protected from deportation and they are allowed to work legally in industries suffering labor shortages.
So, Heather, we know that there are 7,400 men, women, and children still in the city shelters, 2,100 migrants living on the floors of police stations across the city and at O'Hare. What impact will this have on all of them?
Well, some of them, the vast majority of them, are Venezuelan, and under this protected status, they will be able to get a job and earn enough money to move out of the shelters and rent their own apartments or homes. Now, they wouldn't be able to work in any job. They have to work in jobs facing labor shortages like transportation, food processing, and warehousing. So there are limits, but it is a light at the end of the tunnel for some of these people who have been living in city shelters and at police stations for months.
Didn't Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker ask the president to do this some weeks ago?
They sure did. And this has been sort of a recurrent ask, not just from Illinois Democrats, but also from Democrats in New York, including Mayor Eric Adams. The president was between a rock and a hard place here because as these crises sort of took over the debate in cities like Chicago, he also feared creating another surge of migrants to the southern border, which could complicate his effort to run for re-election. However, by limiting it to those who are here by July 31st, the president hopes it won't trigger that surge while giving Democratic officials like Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker help in addressing the crisis.
So, of course, as news of the president's action was breaking, Johnson was facing some intense criticism from many of his own allies for signing this $29 million contract to build the base camps that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks. This would move migrants out of the police stations in the airport. Why is this so controversial?
Well, the firm that the city has agreed to contract with, Garda World Federal Services, I should say, also had a contract with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. And so they were the firm that he contracted with to move migrants from Florida and other states to Democratic-led states as part of this sort of political football game, as Johnson and Pritzker has said. Now, that brought intense criticism from Johnson's allies on the city council, saying the city should not be contracting with such a firm, and there aren't all of the city council members convinced that base camps are really the way to go to address this crisis. So it's something we'll have to keep watching.
Of course. Heather Sharon, I'm sure you'll do just that for us. Thanks so much.
I sure will. Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. Paris, back to you.
All right, Brad, it's the plan to enact higher taxes on sales of expensive real estate is swiftly moving forward. The mayor recently announced a new proposal dubbed Bring Chicago Home, which would raise $160 million to fight homelessness by raising taxes on all sales above $1 million and then an additional hike on sales of more than $1.5 million. The proposal would also slash their transfer tax on real estate that sells below $1 million. And joining us are Farzan Parang, Executive Director of the Building Owners and Managers Association of Chicago, and 35th Ward Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa, Chair of the Council Zoning Committee and the Mayor's City Council Floor Leader. Welcome, both of you. Alderman Rosa, you're at City Hall because you had a meeting this afternoon, and there's lots of traffic between here and there. So in real dollars, what does this proposal mean for commercial and residential real estate?
Well, there are over 68,000 Chicagoans experiencing homelessness. And this slight increase on properties that sell for over $1 million and then over $1.5 million, because this is graduated and it's also marginal. So this slight increase will generate over $100 million per year in resources to help address homelessness by providing supportive housing and wraparound services.
Farzan Parang, what does this mean for some of your clients, the building owners, and just not only commercial but residential as well?
Sure. So our association is only office. It's high-rise, generally commercial office buildings. And one thing most people don't really realize about our industry is that the people think that, oh, if you sell a $100 million office building, you've got $100 million, what are you complaining about? They don't really realize that when these are all institutional assets, right? It's very rare for an individual to have enough money to buy a $100, $250 million office building. So really what's happening is you've got Chicagoans, that's our industry, that are financing 70%, say, of a deal, and they go and recruit investment from institutional players, right? Most of real estate on our end is it's pension funds, it's insurance companies, it's REITs, it's large entities that can invest anywhere in the world, and we're trying to convince them to come to Chicago. So that transfer tax is calculated based on the entire dollar value of the sale, but the financing, the lending, always goes back to the lender. And so the payers of that, say it's a $100 million sale, is really only the $30 million in equity. So it's a significant margin, and our concern with it is that it's going to affect economic activity for an industry that is at a existential challenge. It's sort of once in almost 100-year crisis for our office.
You're talking about sort of the vacancy right now in the Central Business District and the Loop in downtown. So Alderman Rosa, what about that? Could this suppress some of those big sales and then, as a result, move some of that property tax burden to homeowners?
No, not at all. You know, the administration has been very intentional. It took us many months, lots of dialogue with real estate industry experts, lots of dialogue with local and national experts to land at this proposal. This is a graduated, marginal proposal. It's a progressive proposal. It will lower the one-time real estate transfer tax on 96% of sales, because 96% of sales in the city of Chicago are under $1 million. And then for properties between 1 and 1.5 million, it'll go slightly up a little bit. And then 1.5 million and more, it'll go up just a little bit more. You know, for that highest bracket, that property that sells for over 1.5 million, there are other cities where they're paying 3%, 3.75%. For example, in Philadelphia, it's 3.287%. So there are states that are comparable, there are cities that are comparable to us that are paying a higher rate than the one that we're proposing, and deals aren't being killed there. What we're seeing is record investment in cities across the nation. You know, as far as I'm pointed out, you or I, middle-class folks, we're never gonna buy these $100 million, $200 million properties. Who's buying these properties are Canadian pension funds, hedge funds. And if you look at what's happened over the last several years, they're making more money than ever before. So what we're looking to do is we want to ensure that we're investing in addressing the crisis of homelessness in our communities. And this is the smart strategic way to do it.
All right, Farzan, so the argument here is these these hedge funds, REITs that are buying up these properties, they can absorb this added cost, right?
Yeah, I don't know what market he's talking about. I mean, if you're looking at our office market, we're seeing there's no transactions. We just had, I think, the first office building downtown sold all year, and it sold at a 60% loss. We're seeing everything from 40 to 80% drops in value in our market. So I don't really know what the chairman's referring to when he's talking about making hand over fist. I mean, the office market in real estate is in a complete catastrophe. And the argument that we try to clarify for folks is, again, these are not houses, they're not people. This is economic activity, and it supports people throughout the entire city, right? When our industry recruits investment, those are all union jobs. The people who are engineers in the building, the custodial workers, the security folks, everybody who does the metalworking and everything that goes on in a building, that's all union work. It supports everybody in the entire city. And when you look at the property tax base, a 40 to 80% loss in value in downtown office buildings is a 9 to 18% increase in residential property taxes across the whole city.
Talk about that shift.
Yeah,
because there is one property tax levy and the taxing bodies have to get that amount no matter where it comes from. We heard from the statement from Neighborhood Building Owners Alliance. They sent us a statement today saying any owner thinking of selling in the next few years will need to raise rents now to cover the impact of this tax increase, often by $100 a month. And this is a group that represents neighborhood buildings, more residential. So what about that, Alderman Ramirez-Rosa? Could this lead to higher rents for folks?
So the primary leadership behind the NBOA organization, these people own hundreds of units, they own thousands of units. I've spoken with them many times. They take a very extreme position on these issues. And they use the same game book, which is they try and use fear-mongering tactics that simply have no basis in reality. You know, when we want to talk about what's happening right now in the city of Chicago, we have to recognize that our real estate market is hot. We're leading the nation in a lot of different metrics. And we also have to recognize that when it comes to return to work, we're leading the nation right now. A lot of data came out this past summer that showed that we are leading the nation in people coming back to the central business district to go to their jobs. So Chicago is seeing a lot of investment. Of course, we know that interest rates are really high right now. We know that that is the primary thing that's kind of cooling down the market right now, but that's not going to be forever. What we have to do is we have to address the crisis of homelessness in our communities. And people have been working for a very long time to think of solutions and say, how can we create a local source of funding to chip away at this issue year after year after year?
This is something that's been on the table.
Way to do it.
It's been on the table for a while. We need to clarify for viewers, though, that it does look like this is on the fast track to pass, but that means it becomes a referendum, it goes on the ballot, and then Chicago voters will have to decide. So, Farzan Parang, if it does get to the ballot, is there going to be some kind of public campaign to sort of influence voters one way or another?
I want to correct two things.
Go ahead.
First is we are not leading the nation in return to office. That's based on Castle data, and it says that we're higher than the average. It doesn't count our actual competitor cities, and that's actually data of Castle customers in the metropolitan area. It's about 10 percentage points higher than what we're actually seeing downtown. I also want to clarify, the problem with this proposal is not, everybody in our industry even agrees, homelessness is a major crisis in the city, and it was even before you had all the asylum seekers, before you introduced that flashpoint in the crisis. The challenge is that this proposal has not been, there's a lot of work you still have to do. There's no, even if you look at any tax, you want to have a value proposition, right? What are you getting from the tax? there's no program here. There's no metric about what we're doing, where the money's going.
That's
Where's
not
the
true.
CHA
That's
in
not
all
true.
of this? What happened to the? I've read there's only 15% of federal money for homelessness has been spent. There's no real program. It's very high level.
So you're talking about, is this money going to be spent where it's intended? I know that's a concern. We have to leave it there, though. We'll continue to talk about this. Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa, Farzan Parang from BOMA. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
And up next, one-on-one with Mr. Hamilton himself. That, of course, is Lin-Manuel Miranda. So please stay with us.
Lin-Manuel Miranda made a stop in the Windy City to commemorate the official return of Hamilton to Broadway stages. Arts correspondent Angel Edo sat down with Miranda to get his take on why the show's return to Chicago is so special.
I hear that we have a special character on Sesame Street named after you, Lin-Manuel.
Lin-Manuel, that's right.
Yes,
Well, also, my first job was an internship at WNET, Channel 13, the PBS affiliate in New York City. I worked in educational services. I got everybody coffee. I alphabetized Reading Rainbow.
How old were you when you did that?
Like 14.
Would you say that that was when you realized that you were interested in theater, or what was that kind of
Oh, I
pivotal
was interested
moment
way
for you?
before that.
Okay,
I
okay.
just, you know, I needed a summer gig, and it was a great place to work, and it was a great, really great environment. And yeah,
That's amazing.
we love the PBS vibes.
Switching gears into Hamilton, tell me, what has it been like before we get into the show? I know that you had a very long-standing relationship with the Obamas. In fact, I feel like they are kind of a pivotal moment, right, in the evolution. When the world was first introduced to Hamilton.
The split full of it, debt-ridden. 2 years later, see Alex and his mother bedridden.
And this idea that you had that wasn't really making sense in the elevator pitch, but by the end seemed to capture everyone.
That's a pretty good way of putting it. I was invited. This was also very new. We were very early in the Obama administration. This is May of 2009. And they were doing the first evening of poetry and spoken word in the White House.
The ship is in the harbor now, see if you can spot him. Another immigrant coming up from the bottom.
I was supposed to do something from In the Heights, because that was the show that was running on Broadway at the time. It was my first Broadway show. And they said, unless you have something about the American experience. And I had the one song I'd written for Hamilton. I really hadn't written anything else. I had big plans, but I just figured, well, damn, if it doesn't work in this room, like, where's it gonna work? So I just figured this was kind of the perfect test audiences. I laugh now at how brave I was to sing this piece that only my wife and Alex Lacamoire had ever heard in the East Room of the White House. But there we were. And you can tell how nervous I am if you watch the video.
Yeah, I'm the damn genius that shot him.
And I was freaking out. I was debuting a song in front of the leader of the free world. I remember making the mistake of looking at him right in the eyes when it started, and I said, can't do that. And I looked and I saw Michelle. I was like, can't look there either. And it was actually Michelle's mom who became my anchor. She was kind of looking at me like, poor baby.
How does it feel to have Hamilton back on the stage, and specifically in Chicago, being a city of theater, of local theater specifically? This was one of the first stops when Hamilton really reached its peak, and it seems really great that it's back here now post-COVID.
You know, and I would even go further than, it wasn't just our first stop, it was a Chicago company. And to watch, it was the second company we'd set up. It was the first time after the original company. They were all stars, and it was such a thrill to watch Chicago embrace the show and embrace the actors in the show. You know, you'd see Josh Henry and Miguel Cervantes at Cubs games, like, ah! And they really became a part of the fabric of the town. And I want that for this tour. This tour that is coming in is an incredible, talented group. They're coming from Alaska. They've been all over the country. And I'm excited for Chicagoans to embrace them the way they embraced that original Chicago company. I'm excited for them to sit down for a few months because they've been running around. And I'm really excited to also just support live theater in Chicago again, because it's struggling here, it's struggling in New York, and I'm really proud that we can bring the show here.
What would you say to maybe viewers that are not really tapped into local theater or understand the necessity of it, specifically in Chicago, of why they should come and see the show beyond it being amazing?
Yeah, listen, I think our two greatest theater ambassadors this summer have been Taylor Swift and Beyonce. You've gotten, you've taken the people you love to hear that music you love. And it wasn't because it was some music you hadn't heard before. You have heard every album in the Eras tour. But to experience that in a room full of people who love what you love, and with your loved ones, whether it's a first date or whether it's with your mom, it's really special, and there's nothing that duplicates it. And the same is true of Hamilton. I know there is a whole generation who fell in love with Hamilton when it was streaming, when it was made available on streaming. And I'm excited for those folks who maybe didn't see the first Chicago run to come see it, because there's really nothing like seeing it live.
I'm one of those. I've actually been waiting for it to come back. I haven't seen it streamed because I needed to see it in the theater, so I'm so excited to see it.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Worth the trip to see it. Visit our website for more information on when you can see Hamilton on Broadway in Chicago. There's also more of our conversation with Lin-Manuel Miranda online. He shares how he avoids burnout during production, as well as his favorite artists of the moment. Paris, over to you.
He's still so enthusiastic about this, despite how often it's been reproduced all over the world. That's great. All right, well, Paul Farabak, another guy that's very enthusiastic. He's a man who wants you to take Midwestern food seriously. This region, he says, is more than just crock pot meals loaded with cream of mushroom or salads mostly made of marshmallows and Cool Whip or Cool Whip. Farabak says America has underestimated the culinary depth and national influence the Midwest has had on the country's taste. Farabak's the chef and co-owner of the restaurant Big Jones in Andersonville, and he's out with his second book this week. Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg tells us it's as much a collection of recipes as it is a tour through our region's food history.
I'm going to put some fries over here.
These days, Paul Farabak's mostly cooking up Cajun food at his restaurant.
I'm going to be working on these and baste them, and then we're going to plate them right here.
But his earliest culinary memories aren't from Louisiana, they're from Indiana.
My grandparents' house on their old farm, and where the dairy cow was and where the smokehouse was and where the blackberry patch was. They still did hog killings. Grandma had the garden and canned all of these things that I'd just never seen anything like it.
When he was traveling around the South learning the cuisine he now makes for a living, he was impressed by the array of regional foods. And when he went home to visit his folks,
I started to realize, hey, actually we have a lot of cool and interesting regional foods here that when I was growing up I just took for granted. I wanted to kind of write down and document a lot of those traditional foods because foodways change and they disappear.
On the morning we visited, Farabak was cooking up some Midwestern barbecue. By celebrating these recipes in his new book, he also wanted to dispel some of the small-minded views people might have of Midwestern cooking.
It's derided as meat and potatoes, ranch dressing, which we all love, but there's a lot more to it than that.
He wrote, "Throughout our history, the Midwest has been the most consequential region in the development of American food and drink culture."
I can't even really possibly go into depth about why it's so important, but the Midwest has been sort of the industrial hub of the country. That was how it developed. It's been the breadbasket for the country as well.
The meat packers of Chicago, the flour millers of Minnesota. But the Midwest wasn't just making food, it was influencing how people cooked. The character of Betty Crocker was created by the Minnesota-based company that became General Mills.
I'm Betty Crocker, and I promise you a perfect cake every time you bake.
Betty Crocker, who had more listeners in the South for her radio program actually than she did even in the Midwest.
Cookbooks were a huge part of Farabak's research, particularly community cookbooks, and many of them in German, brought by immigrants to the Midwest. Among his finds,
the oldest hamburger recipe that anybody's going to know up to date, the oldest fried chicken recipe.
You heard him right. Fried chicken. Midwestern, not Southern. Farabak also says all beef hot dogs were invented by Chicago's Jewish community.
Sorry, New York, Nathan's didn't invent the all beef hot dog. It was actually decades earlier.
Farabach says while fried chicken isn't originally Southern, a lot of Midwestern cooking is shaped by patterns from the Great Migration, with Black Americans from the Delta resettling up north as meat processing was taking off. James P. Lemon, founder of Lem's, saw meat packers cutting the tips off of spare ribs and put them to use for his Chicago-style barbecue, like Farabach cooked up for us.
Most barbecue, you're doing low and slow. Chicago style, we're doing a little bit higher heat and for not as long.
And what are you basting it with?
This is a Chicago-style barbecue sauce, which is similar to Memphis. Again, there's that connection. Family recipes, traveling up and down the Delta region.
There are also multiple profiles of chefs across the region. Farabach hopes to highlight the food ways of people of color in his book. He says it's time Black, Latino, and Indigenous Midwesterners get their due in the world of food and beyond.
We need to invite them to the table and support what they're doing, because we're all going to be richer by having them as part of our community.
A community that Farabach hopes starts getting louder about its contributions.
We in the Midwest maybe need to think about tooting our horn a little bit and puffing our chests up and having a little bit of pride about what we've done for the country and what the country eats.
As for what I got to eat the day of our conversation,
go ahead, help yourself.
Not my usual breakfast. This is delicious.
Enough said. For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
Saw it on Monday and seeing it again.
Still hungry.
It's still tough to watch on an empty stomach. All right, Paul Farabach's new book is Midwestern Food, a chef's guide to the surprising history of a great American cuisine. It's now available for purchase.
And it looks delicious. That is our show for this Thursday night. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe. See you at Big Jones after the show.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to be a multilingual law firm that provides translators for a variety of languages.